If I could sit down and talk with you right now, I'd tell you something that could change everything. But I know you wouldn't believe me, not yet. Because right now, you think you have time. You believe life is an endless straight path ahead, where your dreams and aspirations are waiting. You think success, happiness, and meaning are things that will come someday. When you have more money, when you achieve bigger goals, when you finally feel enough in some way. You tell yourself, just a little bit more, and then I'll be okay. But let me tell you a truth that few dare to face. That path doesn't stretch on forever. Someday, sooner than you think, you'll wake up and realize the future isn't some distant thing. You're standing right in it. And when that day comes, the things you thought would make you happy might not matter as much anymore. The things you feared losing may not be as terrifying as you once imagined. And the biggest question you'll face won't be, where am I going? But, who am I really? To the you of the past, if I could introduce you to some of the greatest minds in history, those who spent their lives searching for meaning, what would they tell you? Carl Jung would say there are parts of you that you've never faced. Your shadow, your fears, buried desires. And until you dare to confront them, you'll only ever live a fraction of who you could be. Abraham Maslow would remind you that success isn't just about money or status. It's about becoming the fullest version of yourself. Viktor Frankl would share days in concentration camps where he realized life's meaning isn't something someone gives you. It's something you create, even in the darkest of circumstances. Soren Kierkegaard would say the fear you're running from isn't your enemy. It's the path to freedom. Because only when you face it, do you truly live. Carl Rogers would ask, is the life you're living truly the life you were meant to live? Or is it a role you've unconsciously accepted? Alfred Adler would remind you that you're not a prisoner of your past. You're not limited by what's happened to you. You're the author of the next chapter of your life story. All of these great minds share the same message for you. Midlife crisis isn't a crisis, it's an awakening. And the most astonishing thing? Your real life, your life that belongs to you and only you, may not have even begun yet. My friend from the past, you've spent your whole life trying to be the right person, the one who fits in, the one who earns respect, the one who makes others proud. You've done everything to meet the expectations of your family, your friends, society, even the standards you're not sure you truly believe in. You've tried to prove that you are worthy of love, of recognition, of a place in this world. For years, you've convinced yourself that this is who you truly are, that the version of you the world sees is the only version that exists. You've forgotten that there's another part of you, one you've hidden away for so long that even you have lost touch with it. But I need you to listen carefully, because Carl Jung would tell you the truth. You are not just the person you present to the world. You are also everything you've kept in the dark. The doubts, the buried fears, the suppressed anger, the quiet ambitions you've been too afraid to chase, the sadness you swallowed down and told yourself wasn't real, the wounds from your childhood that you never truly faced. These things don't just disappear. They become your shadow. And as long as you refuse to acknowledge it, it will control you. Jung spent his life studying why people lose themselves, and he discovered that most of us are only living half a life. We wear masks. We play roles that society expects. We become whatever we need to be to feel safe, accepted. And for a while, it works. You might have a stable career, a respectable relationship, a life that looks complete. But are you truly happy? Have you ever felt like you're living a life that doesn't quite belong to you? And then one day, a crack appears. The mask starts to slip. You realize that the life you built no longer feels like enough. Not because it's bad, but because it's incomplete. This is the moment Jung called the confrontation with the shadow. It often happens in midlife, when everything you've ignored, everything you've buried, begins to surface. And it does not ask for permission. It forces you to look directly at yourself, not the version you've carefully crafted, but the real you. And that is terrifying, because to fully accept yourself, you have to face the parts of you that you don't like. The mistakes, the wounds, the darkness you've tried so hard to hide. You have to admit that you are not perfect, that you have fears, contradictions, and desires just like everyone else. But what happens if you refuse? If you ignore your shadow and pretend it doesn't exist? That's when it begins to control you from the darkness. It turns your desires into addictions. It transforms unspoken fears into anger at the world. It makes you resent others for things you refuse to accept in yourself. It can show up as depression, anxiety, or an emptiness you can't explain. This is why so many people in midlife feel lost, bitter, or restless. They are fighting a battle against something inside them, but in reality, it is not an enemy. It is simply a part of themselves they have never learned to understand. But here's the secret Jung wanted you to know. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is the missing part of you. It is the parts of you that you rejected but have always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. And if you have the courage to face it instead of running, you will realize that everything you've been searching for has been there all along. So how do you integrate your shadow? Start with radical honesty. Stop censoring your thoughts just to please others. Be honest with yourself about what you truly feel. Pay attention to the things that trigger you in others, because often they are reflections of the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. Write down the things you've always avoided. Face them, question them, understand them. Learn to forgive yourself. You are not perfect. No one is. But that doesn't mean you are unworthy of love. Remember, the shadow is not something to fear. It is only scary when you don't understand it. Once you befriend it, it becomes your greatest source of strength. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, but it is also the most liberating. Because the moment you stop fighting yourself, you realize you were never broken. You were simply unfinished. And now, finally, you have the chance to become whole. Not the person society wants you to be. The person you were always meant to be." But, my past self, if facing your shadow was the first step, then the second is one of the most important things you'll ever do. Redefining success. All your life, you've chased a version of success that was handed to you. A good job, a happy family, respect from society. You did all the right things, climbed the ladders you were told to climb. But then, you faced a terrifying realization. You got everything you thought you wanted, yet you still felt empty. You're not alone. Abraham Maslow, one of the greatest psychologists of the 20th century, studied this. He found that most people spend their lives chasing basic needs, safety, money, status, but only a few ever reach the highest level of human growth. Maslow called it self-actualization. The moment you stop living according to others' expectations and start living in alignment with your deepest calling. You can have all the money and success in the world, but if you're not living according to your true values, you will always feel empty. So how do you know if you're living a self-actualized life? Maslow discovered that those who reach this level share one key trait. They prioritize growth over comfort. They question their own beliefs. They're not afraid of failure because they see it as part of the journey. They choose the harder path, knowing it leads to true meaning. My past self, are you willing to trade comfort for growth? Because if you want to find real meaning, you can't keep walking the same roads. You have to be willing to step beyond your comfort zone. And this is why, at this moment in your life, one question will haunt you more than any other. Why am I here? Viktor Frankl, a psychologist who survived Auschwitz, discovered something that could change the way you see your life. In the face of unimaginable cruelty, Frankl noticed that the people who survived weren't the strongest or the smartest, but the ones who could find meaning even in the darkest moments. He wrote, "Life is not about finding meaning. It's about creating it." Frankl believed that meaning is not something you discover. It's something you choose to create. There is no fixed meaning in life, only the meaning you decide to believe in. And even if you feel lost, even if you think your life has gone off track, you can always start over by creating a new sense of purpose. What does that mean? Stop asking, "What do I want from life?" and start asking, "What does life want from me?" Find something bigger than yourself to serve. Something that makes you wake up every morning with a sense of purpose. Because, my past self, your life is not something waiting to begin. It's happening right now, and only you can make it meaningful. True freedom is not the absence of responsibility. It's the commitment to something greater than yourself. But how do you find that? Joseph Campbell, one of the greatest mythologists of all time, studied stories and legends from around the world. He found that every hero, whether an ancient warrior or a modern-day visionary, follows the same path. He called it the hero's journey. And here's what he discovered. At some point in life, Everyone hears the call to adventure, an inner voice urging them to step beyond what's familiar and into the unknown. But most people ignore it. They're afraid. They don't want to leave what's comfortable. They worry about failing. But Campbell realized that those who dare to step into the unknown go through a profound transformation. They face challenges, they stumble, but in their darkest moments, they discover who they really are. You may have already heard that call. Maybe it's a dream you abandoned long ago, a passion you never pursued, or simply the feeling that your life must mean more than this. The question isn't whether you can do it. The question is whether you're brave enough to say yes. Because every great journey begins with a single step, and that step is entirely within your power. My past self, maybe you're standing at a crossroads right now. Maybe there's a restless feeling inside you, a quiet voice whispering, it's time for a change. Maybe you've ignored it because change is terrifying. But remember this, no one becomes a hero by staying in their comfort zone. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to take the first step. Because in the end, the real question isn't, what can I get from life? But, who can I become? My past self, if there's one thing I want you to take from this letter, it's this. You are not stuck. You are not a victim. You can always change. Life is not something that happens to you. It's something you create. And if you want a life that is meaningful, a life worth living, then stop waiting. Don't wait until you're good enough. Don't wait until you're ready. Don't wait until everything is perfect. Because no one is coming to save you. No one is going to hand you the life of your dreams. You are the one who has to create it. So take the step. Embrace the journey. Become who you were meant to be, your future self. But there's a second kind of fear, one that feels different. It shows up when you're standing at the edge of something new, something that calls to you, even as it terrifies you. That's the fear you need to lean into. Think about the things you've always wanted to do but never dared. The job you secretly dream of, the place you've always longed to live, the part of yourself you've hidden because you're afraid of what others might think. The only thing standing between you and that life is fear of the unknown. Kierkegaard's leap of faith isn't just about taking risks. It's about believing in something you can't yet prove. For some, that means faith in God. For others, it means faith in themselves. But at its core, it's the choice to believe that the life you are meant to live exists on the other side of fear, even when you have no evidence yet. One day, my younger self, you will reach a point where staying the same becomes more painful than changing. You will stand on the edge of something new, heart pounding, stomach twisting, wondering if you can really do this. And I need you to remember this moment, the moment you finally understand that fear isn't a signal to stop. It's a sign that you are standing at the doorway of something extraordinary. So how do you take the leap? Recognize when you're facing a transformational moment. If a decision excites you and scares you in equal measure, pay attention. That's your sign. Stop waiting for certainty. It will never come. Begin, even if you don't feel ready. Remind yourself that the biggest mistake you can make is doing nothing. Kierkegaard once warned, to dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. The leap will always seem impossible until you take it. And then, my younger self, you'll realize you had wings all along. Those who step into this journey don't do it because they are fearless. They do it because they refuse to let fear run their lives. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need the courage to begin. Because great lives aren't built on safety. They are built on leaps into the unknown. Go. Explore. Live a life you'll be proud to look back on. Your future self is waiting. And I believe you'll get there. My younger self, you've spent your whole life trying to be the version of yourself that makes others comfortable. You've played the role, said the right things, worn the right mask. You've learned how to anticipate what people expect from you and deliver it flawlessly. And for a while, you convinced yourself that this was who you really were. But let me ask you this. When was the last time you truly felt free? Freedom isn't just about breaking rules or escaping expectations. It's about feeling fully alive, not in restraint, but in authenticity. It's when you laugh without holding back, when you speak without fear of judgment, when you do something not because you should, but because it genuinely makes you feel alive. Carl Rogers spent his career studying what it means to live authentically, and he discovered something most people never realize. The further you stray from your true self, the more lost you feel. So, my younger self, I have to ask you a hard question. If you stripped away the expectations, the pressure, the fear, who would you be? I know this question makes you uneasy, because for years, you've built a life that looks right but doesn't feel right. You've followed a path that makes sense on paper, a good job, respectable responsibilities, a version of yourself that society would admire. But at night, when it's just you and your thoughts, something doesn't quite fit. You keep waiting for it to click. You think that if you just work harder, achieve more, prove yourself enough, then, finally, you'll feel whole. But you won't. Because the problem isn't that you haven't done enough. It's that you haven't been yourself. Rogers called this congruence. When who you are on the inside finally aligns with the life you're living on the outside. And here's the truth, my younger self. That's the only way you'll ever feel truly free. But what if you don't even know who you are anymore? What if you've spent so long being what others expected that you've lost yourself in the process? Rogers had an answer for that too. Small blue diamond step 1. Stop filtering yourself. Pay attention to the moments when you adjust your words, tone, or opinions just to fit in. Ask yourself, if I wasn't afraid of judgment, what would I say? Small blue diamond step 2. Notice what excites you. The things that pull you in, even when they don't make sense, the things that make you lose track of time. That's your true self trying to get your attention. Small blue diamond step 3. Practice radical self-acceptance. Rogers believed that real growth begins when you stop trying to fix yourself and start realizing that you were never broken. One day, my younger self, you'll reach a point where pretending becomes exhausting. Where saying yes to things you don't want, showing up in places you don't belong, and living a life that doesn't fit you becomes unbearable. And when that day comes, I hope you remember Rogers' words. The good life is a process, not a destination. And that process begins the moment you stop pretending. Be brave enough to live a life that's truly yours. Your future self. My younger self. The biggest lie you ever believed is that your past defines you. That the mistakes you've made, the regrets you carry, the people who told you who you were, somehow carved out a path you can never escape. You've carried your past like a backpack full of stones, convinced you can't put it down. You've let your failures become your identity, other people's judgments become absolute truth, and old wounds become the lens through which you see yourself. And you've believed that your future is already written, just because of what's happened before. But Alfred Adler would tell you something different. He spent his life studying why people get stuck in cycles of unhappiness. And he discovered something profound. It's not what happens to you that shapes your life. It's the story you tell yourself about it. My younger self, if you believe you're a failure, you'll act like one. If you believe you're unworthy, you'll settle for less than you deserve. If you believe you're trapped, you'll never try to break free. But ask yourself this. What if that story isn't true? What if you are not who the negative voices made you out to be? What if your mistakes are just lessons, not life sentences? What if, every single day, you have the power to rewrite yourself? Adler knew that at any moment, a person can change the story they live by. You are not a prisoner of your past. You are not bound by your mistakes. You do not have to walk the path others have drawn for you. You are as free as you decide to be, because freedom isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. And now, my younger self, you are no longer chasing life. You are stepping into it. No longer stuck in the past, no longer letting old voices control you. You are moving forward, not because you have no fear, but because you're finally ready. And that's all you ever needed.